This is an English-only version of a talk given previously on Skype with Spanish translation. The Sun, at this time, is in Aquarius in the tropical zodiac. As we noted in a previous talk, Aquarius, both sign and constellation, rules the macrocosmic ethers. In this talk, we are going to discuss the ethers and the vital body in health and healing. There will be some astrology and some physiology, but not a lot. In this, we are following the lead of Max Heindel, who showed us how important the vital body is in health and healing. Healing begins in the vital body before it works into the dense physical body. In fact, the dense physical body is suspended in the matrix of the vital body. The building of the dense physical body and any changes in it are accomplished through the vital body. From materialistic physiology, we learned that conception occurs when a sperm penetrates an ovum and starts the cell division process. Max Heindel tells us much more. This is because controlled clairvoyance is much more powerful than any tool available to material science. Max Heindel tells us that the first cell differentiated after the sperm, which carries the seed atom of the dense physical body, penetrates the ovum, which contains the seed atom of the vital body, is a heart cell. That cell is the cell which contains the seed atom of the dense physical body throughout life. Any material that is incorporated into the dense physical body must harmonize with that seed atom. Max Heindel also tells us that the second cell differentiated in the embryo is a pineal cell. He then tells us the reason for this is that through the endocrine system, the entire gestation of the dense physical body can be controlled by the vital body. This is true because the endocrine glands and the endocrine secretions are consolidations from the vital body. Not only is this information amazing, it is of fundamental importance. The Rosicrucian cosmoconception tells us that the vital body had its inception in the Sun period. Thus we can see that the Sun and Leo are the general rulers of the vital body. From astrology and the Rosicrucian cosmoconception, we can see that the microcosmic human vital body is ruled by Leo, the sign opposite to Aquarius, which rules the macrocosmic ethers. All of our bodies are called vehicles of consciousness. It is through our bodies that the spirit becomes conscious, and it is through our bodies that the spirit expresses its consciousness. Thus, in the care and development of our bodies, the vital body is extremely important. Our bodies are our creations. They are direct expressions of our divine creativity. Our evolution into divinities is through our creation, manifestation, and manifestation of our bodies, all of them. Let's look at this in another way, a very different way. The steps to godhood are based on the structure of the evolutionary creation. Part 2 of the Rosicrucian cosmoconception gives a simple picture of that structure and that struggle. We become what we become according to what has been built into us during the involutionary half of the creation. In the second half, we become divine by creatively developing the things built into us. An important part of this creative work is sharing those principles as they come to consciousness with the other involving life waves, the ones following after us, the minerals, the vegetables, and the animals. Max Heindel tells us in several places that in between rebirths, we function directly within the nature forces of all kingdoms, including humans. The Rosicrucian cosmoconception discusses the stages of future development as reflections of the evolutionary past. In the Rosicrucian cosmoconception, there is a table of the stages of animal evolution, such as the mollusks and the vertebrates, and it discusses them in reflection to future development. There are other simpler ways of discussing the steps of initiation and evolution. In literature and in theology, they are sometimes called the steps of apotheosis. Each step has a trial that must be overcome and a work which must be accomplished to take that step. Every myth and every fairy tale that has a hero or a heroine has a trial and a work in it. Usually, there is a series of trials and works that must be accomplished. The heroes and the heroines are the individual going through initiation, which is an accelerated activity of what everyone passes through in the ordinary evolution. In the Western world, one of the earliest and most well-known set of steps of apotheosis is the 12 labors of Heracles for him to become a god. Many writers have written all kinds of things about them. The writers include mystics, church fathers, and even Isaac Newton. They all agree that the 12 labors are associated with the 12 signs of the zodiac. This is a subject that is worthy of many books and talks. We will talk only a very little bit about one labor, the first labor. The first labor was to overcome and flay the Nemean lion. The lion was created by demonic beings and was almost impossible to overcome. Heracles first used his bow and arrows, but they bounced off the lion, causing no harm. He then tried his sword, and his sword bent and could not penetrate. Finally, he used his club, but his club shattered without harming the lion. Finally, what he had to do was choke it with his bare hands, and in the process, he lost one finger. All of the authorities agree that the lion is the sign and or constellation of Leo. But the authorities do not know why it was the first labor. Max Heindel gives us that reason when he says all occult development begins with the vital body. To repeat, all occult development begins with the vital body. The great leaders of humanity knew this, and they designed the myth in this way to work on us subconsciously until we could awaken to this reality. After Heracles choked the lion, he had another problem: how to flay it. The hide was so tough that no knife or tool could penetrate it. Eventually, Heracles intuited that it could only be flayed using its own claws, which were sharp enough and strong enough to do the job. This is the way it is with spiritual things. We must use the things of the spiritual world and spiritual body of which we are working with in order to solve the problems. We can't solve the problems of desire with the mind, and we can't solve the problems of the mind with desire. Similarly, the problems of the etheric vital body can only be solved by the principles of the ethers. For the rest of his life, Heracles wore this lion skin on his shoulders, and he could not be harmed because it was impregnable. This part of the story has several spiritual interpretations. For one, it signifies what is called the diamond-hard soul body that is built by acts of loving, self-forgetting service. If we live lives of unselfish service, we don't need to practice psychic self-defense. The product of our lives, the soul body, will protect us. This part of the story is helpful on another level, a physiological level. Very few have impregnable auras because very few have done sufficient service. However, all of us need to protect all of our bodies and our health from invaders. Some of those invaders are what we call germs, that is, bacteria or viruses. Max Heindel tells us that in health, our vital bodies radiate out from us to protect us. They radiate like the sun radiates. In ill health, our vital bodies are weakened and they droop or sag at the periphery. Max Heindel describes the etheric atoms as prisms. Plato describes them as triangles pointing outward. Obviously, this means that if we keep our vital bodies vital, we protect them from without. Nothing can penetrate those pointed shields. We need to supercharge our vital bodies with ether, especially life ether, to maintain good physical health. This brings us to a subject we have touched on previously. The Rosicrucian philosophy teaches us that we have two different digestive processes. One is chemical, and it is for the nutrition of the dense physical body. The chemical digestive process is served by giving it simple foods, prepared very simply with a minimum of seasoning. By studying and experiment, we can learn which foods agree with our dense physical bodies. Light cooking adds to an easier digestion of foods for the dense physical body. The other digestion is etheric digestion. Etheric nutrition is not really digested in being broken down the way there is the breakdown of chemical foods. It is more of a matter of absorbing the etheric flow of the food. Obviously, etheric digestion is almost exclusively with raw, fresh, uncooked foods. No one can live long without etheric intake. In this, plants are better sources for ether than fruits. Taking in strong charges of ether on a regular basis can greatly improve one's health and vitality. There are several sources for strong charges of ether. The best source is not available to us as Rosicrucian students. It is blood that is drunk as it comes out of an animal. If done regularly, one can maintain a youthful body well into old age. Certainly there are moral drawbacks which are greater than the health benefits, but it is a reality that people can do this, and some do. When animals kill and eat other animals, like lions, for example, they eat the parts of the body that have the most blood first. A second source for rich charges of ether is milk. However, the milk must be imbibed as soon as it leaves the animal. If milk is left to stand for as little as 15 minutes, almost all of the ether has dissipated into the atmosphere. It can be stored in glass if there are special glass bottle stoppers, but that is pretty complicated and pretty demanding, so that it really isn't practical. A third source is fresh pressed vegetable juice from raw, fresh, organic vegetables. The juicing process must not warm the vegetables, and it must not aerate them, which would oxidize the minerals. The juice must be consumed immediately as it comes out of the press. The juice should be gulped as fast as possible. One wants the ethers, and one is not so concerned about the chemical nutrients. It is the ethers that one wants, and that is why we take them in immediately and swiftly. A high ether component is not merely for health. If one is to do magnetic healing, as Max Heindel did, it is necessary to prevent weakening of one's own vital body. For most people not being healers, an abundance of raw, fresh, green, leafy vegetables is sufficient for maintaining the vital body. Getting out into sunlight is also an important factor in etheric diet. Max Heindel beautifully describes how the ethers are absorbed from sunlight and how they spread through the body, and how the ethers vitalize the cells. He describes it in a way that's so beautiful it leaves one in awe. As with all things with the health, finding an optimal balance between living and dead food is essential. The Rosicrucian philosophy correctly teaches that diet is an individual matter. There is not one diet for everyone. This means we must experiment to find what works best for us. The horoscope can help in this, but that is a subject that is way too much for now. For now, we want to discuss this aspect of the vital body more closely to see how it affects health and healing. Earlier we noted how the radiance of the vital body forms a living protective shield against would-be invaders, against germs that would enter. Max Heindel describes another aspect of the vital body. He tells us that in health, it emanates a sound which is like the buzz of a bee. He tells us that the sound is from etheric sound waves. He does not tell us whether those sound waves are produced on the atomic level, or the molecular level, or the cellular level, or on all levels. For our purposes at the moment, the level that the phenomenon occurs on is less important than its role in health. If the vital body is charged with etheric fluid, the buzz is strong and we have good health. If the charge is not strong, the body sags and the tone wavers and one is more easily invaded. So we can see that this is important, and the importance goes much beyond just protecting against invaders. Then Max Heindel describes this phenomenon in more detail and says something very curious. He says these sound waves attract necessary nutrients and to build and or maintain the dense physical body. This is important, so I will repeat that last phrase again. These sound waves attract the necessary nutrients to build and or maintain the dense physical body. The reason for the repetition is to emphasize one word. That one word is attract. The sound waves attract the nutrients. This is important, and it is unusual compared to what we see in our daily lives. For example, if we throw something that is light into the waves, into the ocean, the waves will carry it in the direction of the tide or in the direction of the wind. There's nothing attractive in that. It's being pushed along. It isn't being attracted one way or another. However, if we have waves of electromagnetism, attraction or repulsion depends on the direction of the flow of a current. This involves a universal principle called the right-hand rule. The right-hand rule applies not only to electromagnetism, it applies also to physical vectors of energy and attractive waves. For example, the torque of the Earth tilting is what causes the precession of the equinox at right angles, according to the right-hand rule. The right-hand rule can be bidirectional. If we take an iron rod and wrap a coil around it and run a current through that coil, a vector of electrical energy will pass through the rod. It will produce a magnetic field. Attached to this talk is a diagram of the right-hand rule, and this what has just been described is the diagram in the upper part of the accompanying sheet of paper. The right-hand rule also works conversely. If we run a charged vector An iron rod, if we run a charge through it, an attractive field will wrap itself around the rod whether there is a coil or not. That is what is described in the bottom image. It is the converse. It is when a vector of energy passes through a rod, you don't even need a rod, an attractive field forms around it. It will even work if there is no rod, but only a directed vector. It is apparently this second case, the projected vector producing an attractive field, that Max Heindel is describing. The only difference is that it is polar life ether instead of polar chemical ether that the attraction is occurring in. Actually, in the vital body, the vector is slightly curved. Everything in the vital body is curved. Now, there are several things in this that are important to health and healing. The first is the importance of a strong charge of electric fluid. Whether it is from sunlight or raw fresh milk or fresh vegetables, it is important. According to this principle, we cannot attract even the chemical nutrients without it. Therefore, it is important that we find the optimal amounts and balance of chemical and etheric nutrients for good health. We won't even attract the right nutrients without it. Another important thing is the vector of etheric energy. Spiritual science is a little different from material science. Material science sees things in a mechanical way. The same physical or chemical phenomena always occur the same way to the physical sciences. In spiritual sciences, we always have to take into account divine intervention. For example, if I am sitting in the chair that I am sitting in, I should remain there without getting out of it according to the laws of motion from Galileo. A body at rest stays at rest until something outwardly moves it. Or a body in motion stays in motion until it loses the energy driving it. But we know we can rise out of our chairs and move about. It is the spirit within that supersedes the laws of motion. It is not an energy from without, it is the spirit from within. The attitude of the spirit within affects much more than the rising out of a chair and walking. It is effective in the function of the vital body. In fact, it is more effective on that level than on the physical. An etheric charged vector is not subject, cover that line, an etheric charged vector is not just mechanical. It is subject to the person who is in that vital body. If one is depressed or lazy, the nutrients will not be attracted as well, and the perspective ethers will not be attracted as well, and so the shield will be less. In this, the most important positive attitude is the will to live. Whether it is expressed in sunbeams or in the whiskers of a cat, that radiant will to live is ruled by Leo. To live well, one must have a positive attitude, an enthusiastic will to live. That is the strongest in the Sun and Leo astrologically. If we aspire to be magnetic healers like Max Heindel, we must activate and build an undeniable will. We must be positive about everything. Without that will, we will not be able to control the etheric fields to do the healing. There is another aspect of this Leo principle of will that is important to health and healing. It is so important that an entire section of the Rosicrucian Cosmoconception is dedicated to it. That section is titled The Law of Assimilation. Max Heindel used to love to say, "In God we live and move and have our being." The inverse of that saying is also true. God lives in everything that lives and moves and has being. To the degree that the God has developed in something, that something has the quality of God. In our evolutionary creation, the deepest quality of God is will. Therefore, to the degree that has developed in it, its will it be able to manifest resistance, as in the minerals, for example. We share not only the same universal spirit, we share the same stuff from the macrocosm. Everything is recycled in the cosmos. In this, every kingdom serves. The minerals serve by providing the stuff of form and resistance. The vegetables serve by providing vitality, and so on. But in their sharing, they give their own being. Thus, the stuff of the cosmos has a residue of the will of the beings that have used it. That will asserts itself until it is expended. This means that if we want to use the stuff of the cosmos, we must overcome the will expressed in it. From all of this, we can see that it takes much more will much less will to overpower more lowly evolved forms than in highly evolved forms. Moreover, the stuff of the more lowly evolved forms will stay in our bodies because they will have been better overcome. This means that eating forms from lower on the evolutionary chain will require less digestion, and it will stay with us longer. If we apply this to our lives, we will have more energy to do things like service work and develop spiritually, because we have not spent it all on digestion. It is for this reason that I personally use spirulina as my primary protein source. Spirulina is a blue-green alga, which means it has chlorophyll and means it has a vital body, and it is simple to digest. It is the lowest form of the plant kingdom that has the chlorophyll, the vitality capturing chlorophyll. At present, not many people may want to eat algae as part of their diet, but it is part of the way of the future. Some people scoff at the law of assimilation and say it isn't true. However, we have historical, visible evidence before us. Carnivorous animals do not have excess energy to be able to do work. There is only one carnivorous animal that does physical labor, and that is the sled dog. All of the other working animals are vegetarian. Horses, burros, oxen, elephants, and so on. They are all vegetarian and do not expend all of their energy on digesting food. Of course, humans, most of the humans are omnivorous, do physical work, but that is due to the fall, and that is not because of our nature or our choice. There is one more thing about the will to live, that is ruled by the sun. Max Heindel has shown us that most illness can be avoided by simple, healthy diets. That is true for most illness, but not all illness. In previous talks, we have seen that illness ultimately has to do with it has its roots within. It has its roots in attitudes. Attitudes are usually responsible for bad diets. And they are responsible for malfunctioning of our dense physical bodies. The Old Testament of the Bible tells us that we were cast out of the Garden of Eden in what is called the fall. This being cast out of the Garden of Eden is interpreted in the Rosicrucian philosophy by saying that we lost our clairvoyance. We used to be clairvoyant, but by abuse of the creative energy, we lost that inward faculty. The New Testament corroborates this in that St. Paul tells us that we used to be able to see to the very Godhead itself until we fell as we have fallen. So, we live in darkness. And in this darkness, we sometimes lose hope, or we lose purpose, or we lose a lot of other deep qualities that would give us good health. In this, we falter and sometimes even lose the will to live. This leads to illness and to disability. Max Heindel tells us something very important about this when he talks about healing. Max Heindel tells us that in healing, the healer must often lend his or her will to the patient until the patient recovers. This means we allow the patient to lean on us. This is a very tricky thing. We don't want to overpower the patient, but we don't want to leave them without the will to live so that they can heal. It requires a lot of inner wisdom. Max Heindel tells us that we have to lend the will to the patient. However, we must have will before we can lend it. This means it is imperative that a prospective healer develop unbreakable and always positive will before attempting healing. Self-knowledge and humility are also important, and the trap of egoism is another thing that can detract, but the will is all important. The will must overcome all of these other faults. This side of Leo and the Sun is too much to go into for now. We're only in our preparatory stages of development. It's the only thing we can really say is that in our spiritual exercises, we work on being thoroughly positive, completely positive, and we let nothing stand against the will that comes from within. That is as far as we went in this talk, and we hope to do more in the next talk. Thank you very much.